The two things I particularly like about the story of Jacob wrestling with the angel are text and context. By text, I mean that it is a tale masterfully told with ample room to breathe, a deft blending of mysticism with clarity such that we are drawn into its otherworldly qualities without ever losing a sense of the very real human drama that is at stake. As Heschel said, revelation both exposes and protects the ultimate mystery. It is a work of art. It is so because of context, because this story is a pivot point in one man's life, a point that has been necessitated by his past and is anticipating his future. Jacob was a crook, legend being that while he was still in the womb, he tried and failed to prevent his twin brother Esau, from being the firstborn. Later, as young men, he connived this dim-witted brother out of his birthright, and later still, he deceived their father, Isaac, into bestowing Esau's blessing on him. By the time of the telling of this story, Jacob is a man of material wealth and ethical want. With his arrogance, his inherited riches, his penchant for lies, his numerous wives, and the workers that he never justly compensated. Had he been born in the 20th century, he might have become a New York City real estate mogul. With a conceit for high political office for which he was grossly unqualified. But he was born when he was born. And having wrestled with the angel, he is born again. He is a new person, as evidenced by the name that the angel bestows on him. No longer Jacob, which essentially meant cheat. He is now known as Israel, which means to have struggled with God and to have prevailed. And the first act of this new human being was to go out and meet his aggrieved brother Esau on what was supposed to be a battlefield where they were going to fight to the death. But instead, he begs forgiveness and he makes amends. And from that point onward, endeavors to live a life befitting his new name. It is a story of transformation. And the beauty of it is that it is our story. It is yours and mine, collectively and as individuals. It is ours in its potentiality because in every living moment we have a piece of Jacob and a piece of Israel deep within us. And the only question is, which one will we attend to? There is a story often told in many different contexts, but I first heard it immediately after 9/11. A grandfather is visibly distressed by what had happened on this day. And his granddaughter, too young to grasp the consequences of those events, comes up to him and asks him what is wrong. He says, "I have two tigers fighting inside of me. One is compassion, the other is vengeance." And so the little girl asks, "Which one will win?" He answers, "Whichever one I feed." I think of the great hymn by the 19th century abolitionist James Lowell, who wrote, "Once to every life and nation comes a moment to decide. In the strife of truth with falsehood, for the good or evil side." My only qualm with Lowell is that it is not once, it is timeless. And this is God's grace, that if in times past we have chosen falsehood over truth or convenience over conviction, we will be invited again and again and again to get it right. As would the woman at the temple, who was told to sin no more. But she would sin again, because this is human nature. And she'd be forgiven again, because this is divine nature. And she would live her life as we all do, in the tension between truth and falsehood. But at least now, having encountered the truth, I believe she was finally better equipped to wrestle with it, her strength being the stepchild of her suffering. In the words of the irrepressible Oscar Wilde, every saint has a past. Every sinner has a future. The earth is a shattered vessel, and God has no hands but ours. Be they the hands of the erstwhile cheat or the woman at the temple, be they your hands or mine. So who will repair the damage we have done, if not we ourselves? As the great Islamic mystic put it, we must bear that portion of the world's pain that has been entrusted to our care. And to that end, I thank God for the 4 million young people who marched on this earth last Friday demanding climate change. The Amazon River basin is burning. The Bahamas are sinking. The Arctic is melting. And what, short of a radical reconfiguration of values such as theirs on Friday, what will change that? What does it say about our values as Americans when we have more guns than people, spend $750 billion a year on war and preparation for war, leave 500,000 people to sleep on our streets or in our shelters every night, 25 million people without health care? What does it say about us when we separate refugee children from their families and then house them in cages? In Emma Lazarus's ode to Lady Liberty, her lifted lamp has become a surveillance camera. If you are white and straight and wealthy and educated and probably male, you are welcome here. If, however, you are of the wretched refuse yearning to breathe free, approach at your own risk. And for what it's worth, let's not forget the self-anointed religious leaders who, for the price of a photo op in the Oval Office, either countenance this moral bankruptcy or look the other way while mumbling some senseless platitudes about thoughts and prayers. For they are the ones who would have sided with Pharaoh over Moses and Herod over Mary. So whence the transformation, the fruits of the struggle that will right these wrongs? As you prepare now to search for a new senior minister, I have no doubt that you will find someone who understands that the role of the church is not to reflect culture, but to challenge it. For if you have no enemies in high places, there is something terribly unpopular that you are not doing and should be. Remember Emily Dickinson's counsel. It is better to be the hammer than the anvil. But remember, too, that the angel did not seek first to change the world, but to touch the heart of just one individual, knowing perhaps that for goodness to endure, it must be grounded there in a single conversion of conscience, only to spread by faithful witness and good deed. And so we are presented with the choice of truth or falsehood, for good or evil, every time we find the tigers wrestling in our hearts, when pain or anger or need or indifference rise against us, when in some form or the other, somebody else is impinging on our own sense of happiness or satisfaction. Which way will we tilt, and to what end? I think of a story told of Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychologist and Holocaust survivor. Very, very late one night, he was roused from a deep sleep by a phone call from someone he did not know, a man in deep distress. The man was going to kill himself, but he told Frankl, "I decided to make one more call, and I got your name out of a list of psychologists in the phone book." They were on the phone until dawn, and they did not get off until the man agreed and promised that he would come to Frankl's office later that day. Frankl had no idea what happened when they hung up the phone, had no idea if the man would show up. But when he did, Frankl asked him, "All right, so what was it that I said that kept you from taking your life?" And the man said to him, "Nothing, really. It was simply the fact that in the dead of night, a complete stranger would stay with me, told me life might be worth living." Frankl did not change the world that night, but he changed that piece that had been entrusted to his care. It is not easy. It is not easy. Remember that, like Frankl, Jacob's ordeal lasted until dawn with uncertain results. Nor is it without pain, as the wounds of the martyrs are presaged in the limp that Jacob carried with him into the sunrise for all the remaining days of his life. But nor is it fruitless, because remember too, as the angel told him, he had not simply wrestled with God, he had prevailed. And this is important, because righteousness without effectiveness is like love without power. It leaves us with a kind of soft sentimentality that nurtures our self-esteem while starving our conscience. We must feed the right tiger in order to prevail, to correct the wrongs of a broken world, whether on a stage as great as that world itself, as local as our own house of worship, as intimate as our family, as disruptive as a stranger's plea in the dead of night, or as alien and as uncomfortable to us as the beggar on the street. For my money, nobody ever put it better than St. Francis. God, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Riverside. Like Jacob, you are at the river's edge. The night is deep. The angel awaits. You stand at a place where you cannot remain standing. So engage the struggle. But don't just engage it. Prevail. Accept what wounds might come to you and make your way to the dawning of a new day, because we need you. Be not conformed unto this world. Be transformed. Amen. Thank you, brother.